Thanks for joining in today. This is the Good Neighbor Podcast. We're based out of the Good Neighbor Bookstore in Lakewood, New York. Tonight we're here with J.D. Barker, who is a New York Times and international best-selling American author whose work has been broadly described as suspense thrillers, often incorporating elements of horror, crime, mystery, science fiction, and the supernatural. And he just so happens to be one of my favorite thriller writers. Thanks for joining us, J.D.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I have to say, I want to talk a lot about your marketing strategy and what you have going on for Something I Keep Upstairs. What really led me to your books was the letter that was sent out for The Fifth to Die, the second book in the 4MK series, which I have sold to just about all of my customers. And it was a letter from the 4MK killer that was just sent in the mail to the bookstore, and opened it up, read it, and I'm like, this is fantastic. I think it came with a copy of the book, but I feel like I might have had to ask for that. And then I had to go back and get the first one. That made me fall in love with your writing, and I've read almost everything that you have written to date. Missed out on Forsaken. I finally got that on the shelf in the store. But just another fun story, and then we'll let you talk eventually. With the 4MK series, I read the first one. I was reading The Fifth to Die, and I was almost done with it. My wife was driving us to some work friend event, watching the Bills game, eating chicken wings, but I was just desperately trying to finish The Fifth to Die. Spoiler alert, not realizing it was going to be just a gigantic cliffhanger. And I had the Sixth Wicked Child sitting at home. So the whole time I was at this work event with people that I don't know, all of my wife's friends and their spouses, I was just like, man, can I please just go home and read the Sixth Wicked Child? Because I need that in my life right now.
Well, I mean, the good news there is you had the third book.
Yes.
When these came out, there was a year in between each of them. Fourth Monkey, then another year before Fifth to Die, and then people hit that last page, and they had to wait a year before they could get that last book. And it's funny because when we sold the series, I initially, it was supposed to just be a standalone, just the Fourth Monkey. But the buzz that started around it was just ridiculous on the publishing side. My agent called me and she's like, listen, everybody wants this book. Do you have an idea for a sequel? And I'm like, yeah, I think I could do that. I kind of scribbled out a way to continue the story because I had it in the back of my mind. These characters keep living for me after I finish the book. They don't just stop. They're off doing something. And it was supposed to be 2 books. That's how we sold it to HMH, which is part of HarperCollins now. But I was writing it and I was like, if I do that, it's going to be so condensed. I'm going to be taking out so much material that I really want in there. It's not going to be the kind of story I want to tell. And I'm like, yeah, screw it. I'm just going to tell it the way I want to tell it. So I literally ended that book with "to be concluded." And I know Dean Koontz fairly well. And I told him I was going to do that. And he's like, oh, you don't want to do that. And I'm like, but you did it. You did it in your Jane Hawk series. He's like, yeah, but yeah, I'm Dean Koontz. I do that. This is your debut thriller. And I'm like, people will be okay with it. And they were not okay with it because they had to wait that year. But I turned in the third book the same time I turned in The Fifth to Die. So the publisher could have put it out, if they wanted to, but that industry is just so regimented, they just will not budge, 1 year. So a lot of people had to wait. But now they're all out, so yes. The general recommendation is if you get to the second book, just buy the third book because you're going to want to have it right there to keep going.
That's my general sales pitch to every customer that comes in. I'm like, Fourth Monkey works on its own. If you get into the second book, please do yourself a favor and pick up the third book as well.
Yeah. And that letter you mentioned is funny because we sent that out initially with the Fourth Monkey to bookstore owners like you, to librarians, pretty much anybody who was a book buyer in this industry. And we got about 2 months into that campaign, and we had one person, a librarian, who thought it was real. and she freaked out. She called the police. She didn't flip for people who haven't seen it, and I'm sure you can find it online at this point, but the front page of the letter was literally a letter from the serial killer to the police. But if you flip it over, it's marketing material for the book, so it's not a secret. But she read it, she thought it was real. She freaked out. She called the publisher. They freaked out because one person freaked out. And my thinking is, this is what you want.
Yeah.
Because like I came out of marketing years back in the music industry, and in the music industry, any kind of noise you could make was good noise. It didn't matter if people were talking about it, if you got word of mouth, that's what really, made a difference. And when I sat down with HMH and they went over their marketing plan for Fourth Monkey, and they basically showed me the same PowerPoint presentation that they have probably shown every other author before me. There was nothing new there. So I started to poke holes in it, and they told me, well, we're going to mail postcards out to bookstores. And I went to my local bookstore and I said, hey, do you guys get postcards for books? And he's like, yeah. And he pointed to the trash can, because like they go through their mail, like electric bill goes over here, postcard goes in the garbage, this goes in the, like they don't open them. So that's how that was kind of born. I was like, I wanted to create something where they're going to open that envelope, they're going to read it, and at least get far enough into it to go, holy F, what am I reading? And then maybe it goes in the garbage can, but at least then I've got their attention.
Yeah, for because we have a lot of different people that watch our store's content. There's a number of different people in publishing that watch our store's videos on TikTok. If you're watching this video and you're considering sending out a postcard, please don't. I have owned my store for 7 years. I've been in book selling for 15 years. I cannot recall a time that I was swayed into buying a book based on a postcard that I received in the mail. Your the concern that the librarian had that it was a real letter, it was off-putting. We've had a couple like memorable pieces of mail that were like intentionally memorable. I've also received, and like independent booksellers communicate with each other all the time. And anytime we get something weird in the mail, we're like, hey, did you get this too? And it was just an envelope that had a sheet of paper with a printed out picture of the author with his dog, I think it was, and just a handwritten note of like with the book title and his name and phone number. And like the amount of work, and like I wasn't the only store who would receive that. There was a lot of stores who received this random piece of mail. The amount of work that he had to put in without any sort of thought as to, yeah, this'll work. This'll move the needle.
Watch a YouTube video, take a marketing 101 class.
Yeah.
I mean, I still see it today. I'll turn on TV and watch commercials. I'll watch a 30-second spot and get to the end of it and have no idea what the product is. Like they still, that kind of thing happens all the time. It's just, marketing 101. Like you have to make sure you get your message out there.
And you had mentioned that you're in marketing. I have my master's in integrated marketing and have done that a bit in the past. So maybe we're taking for granted that things are obvious when they're not obvious. But if you are considering printing off a picture of yourself, very low quality, and writing what appears to be a ransom letter, it's gonna just creep people out.
My general thinking with marketing in general, I make a list of what I see everybody else doing to market their product. I don't really even think of it as a book. It's a widget that I'm trying to sell. So what is everybody else doing to sell their widget in today's market? And once I have that list in front of me, I create a completely different list of things nobody is doing. Something that is going to draw attention, something that's going to grab you. If you think about your email box when you come in the morning, whether you're in the corporate world or you run a bookstore or you're an author. You open it up and you've got all these messages and you just sit there, you read the first one, you read the second one. Before you know it, you're hitting that delete key before you're even reading what's in front of you. Like you need to be able to grab people, in this world on every level, whether it's, television spots or it's, in the mail or whatever. It's a tough business to get, I think there were 2 million books that were published last year. Like my book might be one of them. Like, what am I going to do to make my one book stand out above that other 2 million?
Yeah. And even like 2 million is just a gigantic number. What I tell people when they're like looking around the store and asking me how I choose books, I order seasonally from all of the major publishers, and I work with Parson Weems that does a lot of small press publishing, distribution. And so each quarter, I'm looking at least 6,000 to 7,000 titles that I'm scrolling through with catalogs. And then a few months later, I'm looking through another 6,000 to 7,000 titles to see which 100 I'm going to bring in, if that many. So it is breaking through the noise. It is like it's impossible to not judge a book by the cover, because that's going to be the first thing that I'm looking at.
There's a reason that phrase exists, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you're probably getting, I'm with Simon and Schuster. They've got a marketing catalog. They've got salespeople that reach out to people like you, so you're getting those phone calls. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you're getting the random author that just walks through your door and says, "Hey, can you put my title up on your shelf?" Because I was that guy too. At the beginning, none of us know any better. So like
Yeah.
we all do these things.
On the topic of marketing campaigns, you have an interesting one for something I keep upstairs. You want to talk about what that campaign is, how to get involved in it, and where the idea came from?
Yeah, so the book, it's a haunted house story. The tagline for the story is, "For a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die." It's about a 17-year-old kid. He inherits a house that's on a private island. Him and his friends basically do exactly what you would expect them to do. If you're 17 years old in high school and you get a house, what are you going to do? You turn it into a party house. So they're out there. They take their boats out there. They have a couple of parties, but they get bored. And at one point, somebody brings up, "Hey, what would it take to turn this into a haunted house?" So they start right where you would expect them to. There's a couple of scary stories, there's a Ouija board, but things escalate. And, we've got our tagline, "For a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die." So you know where they're going. Like I knew I wanted to write a haunted house story, but I wanted it to be something that hasn't been done before, something different. So what's unique about this is I live on a little island off the coast of Portsmouth in New England called Newcastle. I actually use Newcastle in the book. And I go for a run every day. I do a lap around our island. It's 4.2 miles. And when I cross the beach, I can look out over the water and there's another island off the coast of our island. It's about a quarter mile out. It's very small. It's only about an acre. There's a tiny little house on it with a white, it's a white house with a red roof. And I saw it every day for years. And just, that writer gene in me kept going off. What if, what if, what if? So I based the story on that house, and I got to learn all the local lore. It's been out there for literally forever. I mean, I've got houses in my neighborhood that were built in the 1600s. This place was there before that. So it's got a lot of history. And I incorporated almost all of that into the book. So there's a lot of, fact mixed with fiction, which makes it a lot of fun. But to promote it, again, I had to take a step back. What is everybody else doing to promote their books? What can I do that's different? So what we're doing is we're giving away an overnight stay in this haunted house. We're going to take one lucky winner, or unlucky winner, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
They're going to take 3 of their friends. We're going to put them in a boat, take them out to this, private house on a private island, drop them off on the dock, and nobody's coming back for them for 24 hours. We're going to leave them in a haunted house. So that's our promo. So we've got, bookstores are talking about it. We're talking about it online. But, from a marketing standpoint, as an author, I can do a lot of things to market a book. And, if I look at a Penguin Random House, those guys, we all kind of do the same thing. We throw money at Facebook ads. We throw money at Amazon ads. We buy space in Publishers Weekly. We do this, we do that. But the only thing that actually sells a book is word of mouth. So you need something that's going to cause somebody to hear something and tell 3 other people about it, whether it's the book or something related to the book. So in this case, they're talking about this left and right. There's tons of conversations like, "I wouldn't do it. Would you do it? I would do it. You want to do it? Let's sign up. Let's try and do it." But like people are buzzing about it.
I threw my name into the hat. I don't know if I'm eligible as a bookstore owner, but I've got my name on the list.
Everybody is eligible.
All right. And I appreciate what you're doing along with that. And I was going to promote the heck out of it anyways, but you sign up, I'll have a link listed somewhere in this space for you to click on, and you just put your name, email address, and your favorite bookstore. If you so happen to choose Good Neighbor Bookstore, thank you very much. If you are chosen, we get $1,000. So
which is something like I wanted to try and make this, rewarding and fun for guys like you too, that are hand selling these books, because, now somebody walks into your store, you've got, a reason to talk to them about this book. Not only is the campaign fun to talk about, but, there's a little financial incentive because you deserve it. You're, the people that market books in bookstores, like, I don't think they get enough credit for the amount of work that they do. To hand sell a book that's a big ask of anybody.
We recently shifted things with our store. My wife left her teaching position, and I took on a full-time job with our county chamber of commerce as their director of membership development. And my wife and I actually met working together at Barnes & Noble, and my old manager, through their Barnes & Noble page, commented that my wife was always a better bookseller or a hand seller than I was. And 2 months into her working here, that seems to be true. There's a lot of books that we're shooting through that she is getting into customers' hands. But yeah, the power of the bookseller is, I always appreciate when people realize that we have a little bit more power and a more targeted approach than the Amazon algorithm does.
Well, I mean, I love my local bookstore because I walk in there and they know me, not because I write books, but they just know me because I'm in the neighborhood and they know what I buy, they know what I like to read. And it's like it's like walking into a human version of the algorithm. Like
Yeah.
they're like, hey, we've been holding this one for you. I know you're gonna like this. And I get that vibe in every bookstore I go into, like the ones that survived, the ones that made it through COVID and came out the other side. Like they all have at least one person, ideally a whole staff that's capable of doing that. But like they care about the books just as much as they care about the local community. You need all those pieces to work together.
Having been a fan of yours for a while now, you've now started to branch off into the worlds of co-writing books with James Patterson and starting to co-write books with other authors where that are starting to approach your level. Christine Daigle is one that comes to mind as a more recent collaboration. How did you initially start working with James Patterson, and what has that process been like for you?
Well, a lot of this has evolved. I started in the industry working behind the scenes. I was a book doctor and a ghostwriter. I did that for 23 years. I basically worked on other people's books. My name was never mentioned, but that's basically where I learned how to write. But it was a very collaborative experience. At one point, I ended up with a number of titles that hit the New York Times list that I had written that had other people's names on the cover, and it was enough for me to decide, okay, it's time to make a run at this on my own. And that's when I sat down and wrote Forsaken. But I found that to be very isolating to sit at a desk all by myself and write a book, alone. I missed, I was so used to having other people as part of that project. I missed it. James Patterson, he read Fourth Monkey. We had sent him a copy of it, hoping to get a blurb, and he actually called me and told me how much he liked it. We ended up talking, and ultimately that turned into writing the Coast to Coast Murders together, which was supposed to be a one-off. I wasn't expecting to do more with them, but we're, I think, 5 or 6 books in at this point. I mean, we have so much fun working together, and I learn a ton, working with somebody like that. Not only on the author side, on the writing side, but the business end. I mean, he knows this business inside and out. But I like working with other people. So you had mentioned Christine Daigle. So like the book that we wrote together, it's called Heavy Are the Stones. It's a serial killer thriller, but in real life, she's a neuropsychologist and a writer. So like she was able to bring a skill set to the writing process that, like I could fake my way through. I can do a bunch of Google searches. I can read enough books and watch documentaries to fake my way through that. But having a, real neuropsychologist right there in the writing room, that authentic voice can't be replaced. And I really enjoy that. The one that's behind me right now, it's called You Don't Talk About Emma. I wrote that with a guy named E.J. Feindorf, and he lives in New Orleans. And New Orleans, if you've ever been there, it's almost a character by itself. It's got, it's got a personality to it. And living there, he knows the streets, he knows the people, he knows the businesses, he knows the smell. Like New Orleans is just a very unique place. And he can bring that to the table. So like I love working with people that can do that, add an element to the storytelling process that I can't create on my own, because ultimately we end up creating something very unique that either of us could have done by ourselves.
How is the collaboration process, or how is the collaboration process similar and different between what you're doing with James Patterson and what you're doing with other authors?
It's different with everybody. For my second or third book, I wrote a prequel to Dracula for Bram Stoker's family, and I worked with Dacre Stoker, who's Bram's great grandnephew. Fantastic guy. He used to be a history teacher, so when he writes, his writing is very dry. It's like a textbook, but it's very detailed. So one of the things that I do when I sit down with a brand new co-author is we divide and conquer. It's almost like having 2 cooks in the kitchen making breakfast. If you both try to make eggs at the same time, it's a problem. But if you get one person to make bacon and the other one's making eggs, then everything works out. So we identify each other's skill sets, weaknesses, and go from there.
It having read, I have always been a big reader, just fun quick story. Not always. I actually, after second grade, I had to go to summer school for reading. I eventually figured it out. But I worked at a gas station through high school and college, and I would go to a store and just like pick up a bunch of mass market books. I realized that a couple of the books that I read were a part of the Alex Cross series. I'm like, oh, this is the same detective from the other one. And now, over 20 years later, I've read all of the Alex Cross books, in addition to a number of his other novels. But having read a lot of James Patterson, having read a lot of your books, it was interesting reading because there was just like there were some lines in, especially the Coast to Coast murders, where I'm like, JD wrote that one. Like I could just like there was a line that like I think it was like puzzle it out or something, which was a line that was frequently used in the 4MK series. I'm like,
Yeah.
just I was like sensing out the vibes of.
I sneak those into his books every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one in particular was fun to write because I don't want to get off into the writing weeds too much here, but Patterson is a strict outliner.
Yeah.
There's basically two camps in the writing world. There's outliners and there's pantsers or discovery writers. Essentially people like it at the time, like me, who would come up with characters and a plot, throw everybody together and just kind of see what happens. Like I would write the book without really knowing where it was going. But he always has that detailed roadmap in front of him. And when we sat down to write Coast to Coast Murders, we realized, we're coming at this from two different camps. It probably isn't going to work. So we walked away for about 4 months, and then he called me up. He's like, you know what? Let's try it your way. We're gonna pants this novel. So we literally went back and forth chapter by chapter. I would write a crazy scenario, paint him into what I thought was an impossible corner, and I would send it off to him. And 15 minutes later, he'd write his way out of that and put me into something even worse. And like we went back and forth like that through the whole book. And it's probably to the date the twistiest book I think I've ever written.
And yeah, I took a James Patterson's masterclass on writing. So from that aspect, I got a sense of like how insane, because I try to write and I'm much more of a pantser with it. But that inspired me to try to go the other end of, all right, let's see where this is all going. But it's incredible the amount of detail that he puts in, of like having a sentence for each chapter in the book as he's rolling out with that.
Well, he converted me on me because we finished up Coast to Coast Murders, and he said, "Okay, we've tried it your way. I want you to try it mine." And he sent me an outline for a book called The Noise, and we wrote that one. And honestly, it went so fast. It was very streamlined. There was very little editing to do when we got to the end. To me, the process was more efficient. So I thought I was going to convert him, and he ended up converting me. So when you work with him, it's very much like taking that master class, except he calls you and tells you everything you're doing wrong. So I guess that's probably the only real difference.
That's funny. We talked about co-writing. You did touch on your writing process when you're working on your own. So for the novels that you're writing on your own, do you still stick to a pantser, or have you started to switch over more to outlining where the story is going?
I do both. So when I'm working with co-authors, we do an outline for sure, because I really want to. I'm teaching a lot of these authors. A lot of them are up and comers. It's people that I used to mentor. So I'm forcing them to go down that particular road. For me, it depends on the book. Like you've mentioned the 4MK series a couple times. I'm in the middle of writing some prequels to that. 3 prequels and a sequel. I want to keep the whole thing going. For the prequel stories, I'm completely pantsing them. I didn't write any type of outline, but for the sequel, I wrote an outline. So I kind of go back and forth.
I'm excited that there's going to be a prequel. And I was just talking to a customer on Saturday about the 4MK series, and I'm like, there's just over the years that I've been selling it, I'm like, it seems like, especially the way the story sets off and the titles being 4, 5, and 6, that there should be a 1, 2, and 3 in there. But I'm like, there isn't. This is the start of the story, but it definitely leads itself to where there could be prequels to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It almost feels to me like Sam Porter's in the corner of my office tapping his foot, going, "You're not done." You need to there's so much more to tell in that whole world.
I'm looking forward to hopping back into it when it's done. And when you're writing, we do have a lot of people that watch these that are writers themselves or aspiring to be writers. So feel free to get into the weeds. Do Do you listen to music when you're writing, or do you need silence?
No, I actually listen to a thunderstorm soundtrack. I listen to white noise.
Okay.
I've been doing that forever, and it's mainly because back when I first started doing this, I was in the corporate world, and I had to squeeze out words whenever I could. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week, and in finance, so I would sneak away at lunchtime, and in line at the grocery store. Sometimes I just duck out into a hallway. But I found that putting on headphones, noise canceling headphones, listening to a thunderstorm, it's like very like almost like a Pavlov's dog kind of thing. Like it causes my brain to snap into writer mode. It hears that sound. It's like, okay, we're writing now.
Yeah.
So I've done that all the time, and I can write, on airplanes, at the airport, or the train. It doesn't matter what's going on around me. As soon as I hear that noise, I know it's go time.
I like that. That is a new answer. So a surprising number of people need silence, and with my new job, they're like at the bookstore. I'm always listening to music.
Mm.
For the last 2 months has been sitting in my office in silence, and I've gotten used to it, but not so much to like. I feel like I need to bring in my AirPods and just throw in one so I can hear something other than silence.
Yeah, I need something else going on in the background all the time. I mean, I've tried writing to music. If there's lyrics, then that becomes problematic because it
Yeah.
kind of works itself into the story. And I found that my writing kind of follows the melody. So if I'm listening, I used to listen to or tried listening to movie soundtracks, but they crescendo, they're up and down, and they're this is that's going on. The story would follow that, like as I was writing. Like the pacing would pick up with the music, and it would slow down with the music, and it just didn't work, at least not for me.
Um, just kind of what general advice do you have for aspiring writers or people newer to the craft in terms of like scheduling, your approach, or what? Just spitball some general nuggets.
Spitball. I mean, the one thing I think is key is you've got to write every day. Like you have to write all the time. It's very much like going to the gym. Like I really feel there's a writer muscle. So like the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets and the easier it gets. So back when I was doing the corporate thing, my goal was 200 to 300 words a day, which isn't a lot. It's less than a
Mhm.
page. But if you do that, that's a novel within a year.
Yeah.
So if you can sneak away and just do that, then you'll at least have a first draft done within a year. One of the things that I learned very early on is I had friends that would tell me, "Oh, I got 6,000 words yesterday. I got 10,000 words yesterday." And I tried doing that, but what would end up happening is I would finish that session and I would be exhausted. And like
Mhm.
I wouldn't, like I wouldn't know what comes next. I would basically write until the well went dry. And the next day I would sit down and I would stare at a blank screen for, an hour trying to figure out what, like that to me isn't sustainable. So what I started doing very early on is I stopped mid sentence. So like I know what's coming next. My quitting bell rings at 2:45 in the afternoon. It doesn't matter where I am in the story. I stop. And because I know what there's like a continuation to that sentence, the rest of the paragraph, my brain continues to work that story. My subconscious continues to work that story. And when I sit down the next day, I have no trouble jumping right back into it.
I really like that approach. I've been trying to commit more to my own writing, and I have an author that I've become friends with that's come to the store a couple of times, Sarah Hosey, and she has been my like writing accountability person. But we started this just before the um, Christmas season, and then I started a new job, and I was also acting in a play. I had a lot of excuses for not being able to write, and she checks in on the 15th of every month, and each 15th over the last few months, I'm like, yeah, I tried to do something, but I feel like my approach, you had mentioned the gym, I am just as bad at exercising as I am at writing, where once I get to the gym, like I used to be a really good distance runner, like I'm going to just hop on the treadmill and churn out a 5K at the same pace that I used to do 5 years ago.
Yeah, good
And
good
then
luck
my
with
legs
that.
are going to hurt and I'm going to sit and do nothing for the next 3 months. Um, so pacing, we'll put that
Yeah,
under
I
the
mean,
category of pacing.
if if you can get used to doing 200 words a day, it's real easy to go to 300. It's easy to go to 500, and before you know what you're doing, 1,000. But the opposite problem can happen. If I go on a trip, if I go overseas or something for a book tour, and I stop writing for a week or two, that those numbers dwindle. It's
Mhm.
it's no different, like I said, than the gym. Like you've got to walk that weight back and then get back up to it again.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Um, we talked about the inspiration for something to keep upstairs. Um, so this is a place that is open to the public now. I was looking up the history of it, and it's got a long history. Have you spent the night there yourself?
I don't think I could. Like before I knew the history of the place, I went out there with the guy who was basically restoring it. And he's a local. He wanted to do something with it. It was literally falling over. But the ocean would have probably taken it. So he raised a lot of money and renovated it. And when I met him, he took me out there on his boat. And like I remember getting off the boat and walking up to the house, going in the house, and like all I wanted to do was leave. Like I felt like this really weird vibe. Like I did not want to be there. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling before, but like I kind of liken it to like if you're in a room with a cat and there's a noise in the corner, like that cat is going to just bolt. It doesn't care what made the noise. It doesn't. None of that matters. It's just gone. It'll figure it out later. A person is like we're stupid. We'll stand there. We'll walk into the corner, try to figure it out. Like I think there's like instinctual reactions that we as humans have that we've suppressed over the years. These animal instincts, and like when you stand in a room and like every instinct is telling you to leave, there's something wrong. And I think we should adhere to that. So like that's the vibe that I got the first time I was on Wood Island standing in this house. And then I left and I started to research it and I realized what actually had happened on that island over the years. It was a quarantine zone during yellow fever. During the Spanish-American War, they used to dock ships out there and they would literally starve out the people on the ship. They would capture a Spanish vessel, they would dock it, they would make everybody stay on board until they literally died of either food or disease or whatever. And then they would take the boat. They just throw the people overboard. The waters there, they're cold and there's a lot of sharks. The sharks took care of the bodies. So like this happened for, centuries, bad stuff like this. I found a news story back in 1972. Somebody was picnicking on the beach and they found two bodies out there. And like even that, like it like had this weird backstory to it. Like I tried to find out more. I found a newspaper article, but when I reached out to the local PD to get information, they didn't have anything on it. And in the story, it said the FBI took over the case. Like they basically took custody of the bodies and they took over the investigation. The FBI has no record of it. So like even these two bodies literally just vanished. And I even talked to the DA at the time. He's now a private practice attorney, but he was the DA back in 1972. He's in the picture in the newspaper article, standing there where they found the bodies. He told me he didn't remember it. Like who forgets that? Like I don't want to go to conspiracy stuff, but like to me that felt very, very odd. Like, you don't forget that kind of thing. But like I ran into so much stuff like that about this island. I mean, the history is just amazing. But yeah, in today's world, they finished the restoration and it's a museum. It's actually opening as a museum this summer. So tourists are gonna be able to take boats out there.
Nice. You very vividly describe the interior of this house. How close is that to the reality of what somebody would look like?
It is dead on. So they actually gave me copies of the floor plan.
Okay.
When they started the restoration, a lot of the walls were down. There was holes in the floor, holes in the roof. So they had to reconstruct it, but they had the original plan. So they built it basically back to the way it was at its prime. The funny thing is the people, I've gotten to know them so well when the book was ready to go and they read it, they actually decorated the interior of the house to match what I had in the book because that part didn't exist when I walked through it. So when they bought furniture, when they painted those kind of things, they match what I actually have in the book. So you're going to feel like you're standing in the middle of the story.
That is, now I'm considering retracting my my name from the running for this contest.
Just stay out of the basement.
Okay. That's my general rule of thumb in life anyways.
Yeah, stay out of the basement.
You have written just a ton. I feel like you've had a lot of books come out over the last few years, just between what you've written on your own and what you've co-authored. I really enjoy, this is just a personal note, I really enjoy the letters that you have put into the end of your book. Especially, I feel like it was Caller's Game, and your reflection on after the 4MK book and with the pandemic and everything that was going on in the world, like you just needed to have that's sort of reset with that sort of book. So I just encourage you to keep writing those because I appreciate I appreciate those little notes.
I always, as a reader, like I'm a reader first and foremost, and I always enjoyed running into an author's note at the end where they just kind of gave us a little glimpse into what was going on in their life. So that's just my way of being able to do that.
Um, as a reader, what are you reading now? Do you have any top book recommendations that you're pushing on people now
Let
besides
me
your
see.
own?
We're recording super late at night and it's dark in my office, so I can't see. But I think I've got Stephen King's new ARC over there. Never looks like Never Flinch.
Okay.
Yeah, so that one's on deck for probably tomorrow. I should read more than I do. Like I get so many ARCs at this point. One of the things they don't tell you is, like I love to read, but like at this point I get books from my agent, from my editors, from other people asking me to blurb them, and like the bulk of my to be read pile are these books, from authors that are up and coming, and like I try to help as many of them as I can. So I don't get to read a whole lot of what I actually want to read.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stephen King everything gets pushed aside for the next Stephen King for sure.
That's fair. We could create a self-help group for the people who are inundated with advanced reader copies, because that's something that they don't tell you about when you're buying a bookstore. We're a part of the American Booksellers Association. Every other month we get a box of about 50 advanced reader copies. And then now that I have direct accounts set up with every major publisher, and I've like developed good relationships with like different senior editors and different sales reps, I get like around 10 advanced reader copies every week. So like, I'm like, my wife and I can only read so many of them. And like, there's some things that will come in where like, I just know there's customers that are in love with that author. So I'll just give them that book. We donate a lot to different schools for their faculty lounge, put them together for like baskets for raffles, but it becomes, what is it, Brewster's Millions of
it does.
what do we do with all of these free books that we're getting? And
I take them to area hospitals, to retirement homes, libraries. I've got one of those little free libraries in front of my house. I keep that thing stocked all the time. Publishers do it to me too. Like every time one of my books gets a reprint, they send me a case, and like, what am I going to do with another case of the same book that I already have 5 cases of?
yeah,
So I give them away to anybody willing to take one.
that Richard Chismar has that too. So like, I went to school for film and ended up getting connected with a local independent filmmaker who then is friends with Richard Chismar, and he adapted Widow's Point into a film that was made locally. But through that odd triangle connection, I get a lot of Richard Chismar's books that he's like, I don't know what to do with these, so please sign up and I'll send you a box of them.
He used to run Cemetery Dance magazine too, so that that doubles the like he's getting them from all sides.
Yes, I watch his Instagram closely for anything that might be Stephen King related that's signed. Just that's the coveted thing.
I'm really lucky. You can't really see it because it's dark in here, but like off in the corner there, I've actually got the original pages from Needful Things from Stephen King's typewriter.
Oh, really?
And I got that from David Morrell, who's the guy who wrote First Blood. He used to be a beta reader for Stephen King back in the day. And like he was going through his basement one day and literally found like all the original Stephen King manuscripts from the 80s. He had Misery, he had Needful Things, he had Dead Zone, maybe. There was like 5 or 6 different ones, but I ended up buying it at auction. And it's one of my I love flipping through it because you can see what Stephen King, like almost how his mind works. You can see what he took out of the book, handwritten changes and stuff like that. And as an author, to me, that's priceless.
That I am. I wish I had that.
Well, next time you're in New England, you'll have to take a look.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Just so this will kind of be edited out if we do a longer form video, but if you wanted to do just like a quick, like the elevator pitch for something I keep upstairs, and I can use that for its own video.
I probably should come up with an elevator pitch for something I keep upstairs.
Yeah. Whatever. It doesn't have to be an elevator pitch. Take your time. Instagram videos are can be 3 minutes now. So
Yeah. All right. If you get a chance, check out my next book, Something I Keep Upstairs, coming out May 13th.